The alarm bells rang 3 times across the bridge of the USS Huang Min. Captain Yunji Park looked up from her chair, her dark eyes catching the soft glow of the main view screen. Outside, the stars of the Andromeda Rim stretched endlessly into the black void. She had seen this view 1,000 times before, but it never stopped making her feel small and large at the same time. "Captain, we're getting something," said Lieutenant Jae-Sung Lee from the communications station. His young face showed the first signs of concern. "Energy signature? It's not on any of our charts." Yunji stood slowly, her mind already working through the possibilities. She was 38 years old, with silver beginning to show in her dark hair. Her face was not beautiful in the way the old earth paintings showed beauty, but it held something stronger, the mark of someone who had lived and chosen and lived again. She walked toward the view screen, her uniform crisp, despite the long hours of the mission. "Show me," she said. The screen changed. There, at the edge of their scanner range, was something that should not exist. It was not a ship. It was not a star. It was a pulse of energy that seemed to breathe, to live in a way that made no sense on any chart or in any database. Commander Teo stood from his position beside the captain's chair. He was Tyrellian, one of the few aliens in high command positions aboard this ship. His people had ruled the Space Alliance for 1,000 years through logic and control. Everything in his blue-skinned face and measured voice spoke of a mind that worked like a machine, perfect and without error. "Captain, the odds of this being anything but a natural phenomenon are extremely low. The protocols recommend we log the data and continue our current mission parameters." Yunji did not take her eyes from the screen. "What do you think it is, Jae-Sung?" The young officer looked nervous. He glanced at Commander Teo, then back at the captain. Well, the energy pattern is almost like breathing, Captain. Like something alive, maybe. But that's just my intuition. The computers say it's probably just a neutron star remnant." Yunji smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached her eyes. "Intuition. That's what they tell us not to trust, isn't it?" She pressed the communication button on her chair. "Dr. Kim, I need you on the bridge." Within minutes, Dr. Hae-won Kim arrived, her white coat moving quickly as she walked. Hae-won was 31, and she had been Yunji's closest friend since their academy days. She was the ship's chief medical officer, but she was also one of the few people on the ship who understood what it meant to work with the captain's unusual way of thinking. "What have we got?" Hae-won asked, looking at the screen. "Something interesting," Yunji said. "Commander Teo believes we should ignore it. I want to investigate." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. The Alliance sent out standing orders on every mission. They were clear and simple. Explore, gather data, and follow the protocols. Do not deviate. Do not make choices based on feeling or belief. The Alliance wanted ships to run like machines, and Captain Yunji Park had a reputation for not running like a machine. "Captain," Commander Teo said, his voice controlled and precise, "I must formally recommend against this action. The mission schedule does not allow for unplanned investigations. The energy cost alone would set us back 3 weeks. The logical choice is clear." Yunji turned to face him. Her eyes were different now, still calm, but holding something that made the Tyrellian commander step back half a step. "And the human choice?" she asked quietly. "What is the human choice, Commander?" "The human choice is why the Alliance created the protocols," he answered. "Emotion clouds judgment." Yunji did not argue. She never argued with Teo about this. Instead, she moved back to her chair and sat down. Her hands rested on the armrests, and when she spoke, her voice was the voice of a captain who had made a decision. "Set a course for the anomaly. Half speed. Yellow alert." "Captain," Commander Teo began, but Yunji raised her hand. "That is an order, Commander." Teo's jaw tightened. His people did not disobey orders, even when they believed those orders were wrong. He turned to the navigation station. "Plot the course," he said, and his voice sounded like ice. As the ship moved toward the strange energy signature, Yunji saw Haiwan watching her with a knowing look. They had worked together long enough that they could speak without words. Later, in the privacy of Yunji's quarters, Haiwan sat on the small couch and poured 2 glasses of tea. "They're going to report you again," Haiwan said. It was not a question. "I know," Yunji replied. "They always do. The emotional stability matrix flagged you twice this month already. One more incident, and they will call for a formal review." Yunji looked at her friend. Haiwan's face showed the worry that she carried, the weight of knowing that her best friend was being slowly pushed out of the one thing she loved most, commanding a ship, exploring the stars. "What was I supposed to do?" Yunji asked. "That signature is real. My instinct tells me something important is there. The young officer felt it too, even though he was afraid to say it out loud. When did being human become a liability? When the Alliance decided that efficiency was more important than survival," Haiwan said quietly. "But that's not going to help you when the board reviews your mental fitness." Yunji set down her tea. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. She had spent her whole life proving herself. She had trained harder, studied longer, and made decisions that were good and right, even when they were not logical by the numbers. And still, the Alliance treated her like she was broken, like the very things that made her human were the things that made her wrong. The ship moved quietly through space toward the anomaly. Commander Teo filed his report that night. It went to Alliance Command, documenting how Captain Yunji Park had once again deviated from protocol based on what could only be described as emotional reasoning. Within 48 hours, it came back with a response. A psychologist named Dr. Yongsu Bayek would be arriving on the next transport. His job was to evaluate whether Captain Yunji Park was still mentally fit for command. Neither Yunji nor anyone else on the bridge knew that in less than 10 hours, they would find something that would change everything. They did not know that their captain's intuition was about to prove more valuable than all the protocols and logic in the Alliance's 1,000-year history. But as the USS Huang Min moved through the darkness toward the impossible, Yunji Park stood alone on the observation deck and looked out at the stars. She knew something was coming. She could feel it like a heartbeat in her chest. And she was not afraid. The derelict ship appeared on their screens like a ghost. It was ancient. That much was clear from the moment the sensors locked onto it. The hull was covered in scars and burns, and it drifted in the nebula like a dead thing suspended between stars. The energy signature that Yunji had felt in her chest came from this vessel, a faint pulse that spoke of systems barely alive, barely holding on. "It's massive," said Quan Su Park, the chief engineer, from his station. Quan Su was 42 years old, and he had seen many things in his years aboard different ships. His voice held the tone of a man who had learned long ago not to be shocked by much. "Bigger than anything in our databases, and the design, it's not human, it's not Terrellian either." Commander Teo stood rigid beside the captain's chair, his blue skin looking almost gray in the harsh light of the bridge. He had already composed his report in his mind, another example of Captain Park's recklessness. Now they would waste more time and resources investigating what was almost certainly just another derelict, a casualty of some ancient war that meant nothing to the modern alliance. Yunji leaned forward in her chair. "Can we get any life signs?" "Scanning now," said Lieutenant Jae-sung. His fingers moved quickly across his console. "Captain, there's something here, deep inside the ship. I'm reading. It's faint, but there are definitely power signatures, multiple energy sources, and what? Yunji asked gently. The boy was young, and he was learning that speaking the truth sometimes meant standing against the people who made the rules. And there are life signs. Dozens of them. Maybe more. They're very faint, Captain. It looks like some kind of stasis, but they're alive. The bridge went completely silent. Everyone understood what this meant. This was not just a ship. This was a rescue. Commander Teo spoke immediately. Captain, I recommend we maintain distance and transmit our findings to Alliance Command for further instruction. The protocols are clear on first contact situations with unknown life forms in unknown states. Yunji stood up. Her hand moved to the communication button. Get a rescue team ready. Full medical support. HFY, I want you leading this. Captain! Commander Teo's voice rose, and for the first time, it showed emotion, something close to panic. You cannot authorize a boarding mission without command approval. The risks are that people die while we wait for approval. Yunji cut him off. Her voice was not angry, but it carried the weight of someone who had made a decision that came from something deeper than logic. You have the bridge, Commander. I'm going with the rescue team. HFY moved quickly, already anticipating what would be needed. Within 20 minutes, a team of 10 people were suited up and ready. Yunji suited up too, and the team moved through the airlock toward the derelict ship. The interior of the alien vessel was a maze of darkness and strange corridors. The lights were almost all dead, and they moved by the glow of their suit lamps. The ship smelled wrong, not bad, but alien in a way that made the back of the neck prickle. Systems that might have been life support systems hummed weakly from somewhere deep in the walls. They found the sleeping chamber 3 levels down. It was a vast room, larger than anything the rescue team had expected, filled with pods of crystalline material. Inside each pod lay a being, unconscious, suspended in some kind of liquid that glowed faintly blue. The beings themselves were unlike anything in any Alliance database. They had slender bodies with skin that seemed to shift colors slowly, even in sleep. They had too many eyes, 3 across their faces, and their limbs moved in ways that suggested a biology completely different from anything human or Terrellian. There were 47 of them. Captain, one of the medics whispered, they're barely alive. Their life signs are so low that normal sensors would have missed them. Yunji moved closer to the nearest pod. Through the crystalline surface, she could see one of the beings clearly. Its 3 eyes were closed. Its chest rose and fell so slowly that you had to watch for a long time to see it breathe. This being had been asleep for a very long time. It had probably crossed the galaxy while sleeping. It might have lost everyone and everything it knew while it slumbered in this pod. We take them all, Yunji said. Carefully. We bring them back to the ship. The next 6 hours were a blur of work. The rescue team carefully removed each pod and transported it back to the USS Huangmin. HFY and her medical staff worked frantically to stabilize the stasis systems on the ship. The pods had to be connected to the Huangmin's life support within a certain time window, or the beings inside would not survive the awakening process. Commander Teo watched it all from the bridge, his face unreadable. He had already filed a second report, this time documenting the rescue operation as a violation of Alliance protocol regarding unknown species interactions. It took 2 days for the first being to wake up. It emerged from the stasis pod slowly, gasping for air that was slightly different from what its body expected. HFY was there, speaking in soft tones, ready with medication to ease the shock of awakening. The being opened its 3 eyes and looked at her. Welcome, HFY said gently. You are safe. Your ship was damaged, but we found you. My name is HFY. I'm here to help you. The being made a sound, not quite a word, but something close. It was a vibration that seemed to come from inside its chest. Hei-Wan felt the sound inside her own body, and she understood something that the Alliance's logic could never quite grasp. This being was not trying to speak words. It was trying to share emotion, to communicate the things that words could never hold. Over the next week, all 47 beings awakened. They came from a species called the Kethmir, and they had a story that would change everything. Through careful communication, partly words, partly the strange emotional resonance that Hei-Wan was beginning to understand, Kai, the eldest of the Kethmir, explained their situation. Their world had been destroyed, not by war, not by accident, but by something that moved through space like a force of nature, something ancient and terrible and alive in ways that nothing else in the galaxy was alive. They had called it the Void Hunger. It consumed everything, matter, energy, life. And it was coming back. It had destroyed their world 5 years ago. The survivors had fled in their ship, and they had programmed the stasis pods hoping to reach safety somewhere in the galaxy. They had been asleep for so long that they had lost hope of being found. And then, Yunji Park, the captain that the Alliance called emotionally unstable, had felt something that the machines had missed. She had ordered the ship to investigate an anomaly. She had listened to her instinct, the thing that the Alliance wanted to destroy in her. She had saved them. Commander Teo's third report was already on its way to Alliance Command when Kai reached out and touched Yunji's hand for the first time. Through that touch, Yunji felt something she could never explain to anyone who had not felt it. She felt the desperate hope of a refugee. She felt the weight of a species that had lost everything. She felt the gratitude of someone who had thought they would die alone in the dark. And she understood that she had made exactly the right choice, no matter what the protocols said. The message arrived while Unji sat in the observation room with Kai. Through the large window, the stars burned like fires in the darkness. Kai's 3 eyes watched the light with a sadness that seemed to come from a place deeper than any ocean. The eldest of the Kethmir had not spoken in words for 3 days. Instead, Kai communicated through the strange emotional resonance that seemed to come from somewhere in their very being. Hei-Wan had developed a technology to help translate this resonance into something the human crew could understand. It was not perfect, but it worked well enough. When Kai spoke this way, the crew felt things, genuine emotions, images, concepts that had no human words. "They're going to call me back," Yunji said quietly. She had received the message just before coming here. It was not a request. It was an order from Alliance Command, transmitted through Minister Daeho Choi, who was now on his way to the ship. The tone of the message made it clear: return to base for psychological evaluation or face formal charges of mutiny. Kai turned all 3 eyes toward Unji. The emotional resonance that followed was warm, tinged with something like gratitude, but also carrying a deep and terrible fear. When Hei-Wan checked the translation readings, her face went pale. "What is it?" Yunji asked. Hei-Wan looked at the readings again, as if she could not believe what they showed. "Kai is saying that it's coming. The Void Hunger, it's coming, and it's coming faster than they thought it would." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Over the next hours, as Kai's story unfolded through the translation technology, Yunji began to understand what they were dealing with. The Void Hunger was not a ship. It was not even really a creature in the way that humans understood creatures. It was an entity that existed between the normal laws of physics. It moved through space like a wound opening in reality. It consumed everything, entire worlds, entire civilizations. The Kethmir had watched it destroy their homeworld. They had seen their families die as the sky itself turned black and hollow. "How long until it reaches known space?" Yunji asked urgently. Kai's response came as a wave of fear and desperate calculation. When Hei-Wan translated, her voice shook. 18 months. Maybe less. They don't know for certain. The void hunger moves in ways that don't follow normal physics, but they're sure it's coming. And they told Alliance Command? Yunji felt a chill run down her spine. Before they entered stasis, yes. The Kethmir sent messages to everyone, but their worlds didn't believe them. The Alliance didn't believe them. Everyone thought it was a hoax or propaganda or the desperate story of a dying species. That was when Minister Daeho Choi arrived on the ship. He was a bureaucrat in the truest sense, thin, precise, and absolutely convinced that every rule existed for a reason. He met with Eunji in her ready room, and his first words were delivered with the weight of official authority. Captain Park, you are hereby placed under temporary suspension of command pending psychological evaluation. You will return to Alliance headquarters with me aboard the next transport. Your first officer, Commander Teo, will take command of this vessel. Yunji did not argue. She never argued in situations like this. Instead, she said quietly, "Have you spoken with the Kethmir survivors?" "I have reviewed the reports," Daeho said coldly, "and I have found them to be unreliable. The species is clearly traumatized and seeking support from any source available. The story about this void hunger is almost certainly a fiction designed to ensure their survival within the Alliance." "That's not true," Yunji said. "And you know it's not true. The energy signatures match what they described. The physics of their ship design shows knowledge of advanced—" "Captain," Daeho cut her off. "Your attempts to defend this situation only further prove why you need evaluation. The Alliance does not function on belief and intuition. We function on proof and data. You have disobeyed direct orders, committed an unauthorized rescue operation, and now you are allowing a group of alien survivors to influence your judgment." He stood up, preparing to leave. At the door, he paused. "You will have 6 hours to prepare for transport. I suggest you use that time to reflect on how your emotional instability has led you to this point." Yunji sat alone in her ready room after he left. The walls seemed to close in. She had always known this day might come. The day when her way of thinking, her way of leading, finally collided with the Alliance's rigid structure. But she had not expected it to happen now, not when everything was at stake. She opened a secure channel and sent a message to Captain Wu Jin Kang of the sister ship USS Tybeck. The two captains had never been close, but they had mutual respect. Her message was simple. "Look at the Kethmir data, all of it. Make your own decision." Then she did something that would seal her fate. She sent a transmission to every human world, not through official Alliance channels, not through any approved method. She sent the complete data package from the Kethmir, all their warnings, all their evidence about the void hunger. She sent it with a message that was simple and clear. This is real. We have 18 months to prepare. When Minister Daeho found out what she had done, his face went white, then red with anger. "You have committed treason," he said. "The Alliance will—" But Yunji interrupted him, and her voice was different now. It was not angry. It was the voice of someone who had already accepted the consequences and moved beyond fear. "The Alliance will prosecute me, I know, but you cannot unsend those messages. Humanity will know the truth now. What they do with that truth is up to them." Commander Teo took command of the USS Hwang-min that night. Most of the crew accepted the change without question, but not all. By morning, Yunji found that 40% of the crew had requested transfer to a different ship. They had served under her for years. They had seen her make impossible decisions that turned out to be right. They did not care if the Alliance called her unstable. They cared that she was their captain. And then something unexpected happened. Captain Wu Jin Kang of the USS Tybeck sent his own transmission. He said simply, "I believe her. Join us." The USS Tybeck moved to dock alongside the Hwang-min. Yunji was no longer under arrest. She was no longer a captain, But she was no longer alone either. As the storm gathered on the horizon, both the storm of the Alliance's response and the storm of the void hunger moving through space, Yunji Park stood on the observation deck once more. Kai stood beside her, and the Kethmir's 3 eyes reflected the light of distant stars. Together they looked out at the universe and waited for what would come next. The Civil War started not with violence, but with choice. It started with captains and admirals and ordinary people looking at the data that Yunji had sent out and deciding what they believed. Some believed in the Alliance, in the protocols, in the idea that human civilization had been running perfectly well for 1,000 years by following the rules. Others looked at the evidence and believed in Yunji. Captain Wu Jin Kang was 50 years old, and he had always been a man who followed orders. He had risen through the ranks by being reliable, by never questioning the system, by accepting that the people above him knew things that he did not. But when he looked at the data from the Kethmir, something in him changed. The energy signatures matched, the patterns made sense, and the more he looked, the more he began to understand that this was exactly the kind of thing that the Alliance's logical thinking would miss, something emotional, something driven by survival and desperation rather than profit margins and efficiency ratings. He moved the USS Taebaek to dock with the USS Hwang Min, and with that simple action, he became a traitor to the Alliance as well. Other ships began to make the same choice. Not all of them. Most of the major fleet remained loyal to Alliance command. But pockets of resistance began to form, ships and stations gathering around Yunji's warning, like people huddling around a fire. Meanwhile, in Alliance Command headquarters, General Hyun-Soo Nam sat in a dark office and looked at data that he had obtained through channels that officially did not exist. He was 58 years old, and he had spent his entire life serving the military machine that ran human affairs. He was a strategist, a man who understood that sometimes the protocols were less important than survival. The more he looked at the Kethmir data, the more he understood that Yunji Park might be the most important person humanity had right now. Not because she was the most logical or the most efficient, but because she was willing to act on conviction when the machines said not to. He began, very carefully, to move resources into position, small things at first, equipment that could be explained as routine maintenance, personnel reassignments that looked perfectly normal on paper, but piece by piece he began building a response to the void hunger, not the official response that Alliance Command was planning, which was basically to deny that it was real and hope the problem went away, but a real response, a human response. On the USS Hwang Min, things were changing rapidly. Yunji was no longer in command, but everyone aboard the ship still looked to her for guidance. She worked with Kai and Haiwan to develop a new way of understanding strategy. The Kethmir had survived so long not through cold calculation, but through something deeper. They understood that every being that died was a weight on the survival of the species. They understood that sacrifice and connection and love were not weaknesses. They were survival tools that logic alone could not equal. Yunji began training the crew in this new way of thinking. She brought together groups of people and asked them not just to think, but to feel. She asked them to consider not just what the machines recommended, but what their instincts told them. It felt strange at first. Many of the crew had been trained their whole lives to suppress this kind of thinking. But as they practiced, they began to understand something powerful. They made better decisions. A young ensign named Min Seo Jung was the one who made the crucial discovery. She was 23 years old and brilliant with technology in the way that young people sometimes are, intuitive rather than trained. She had been running the same calculations about the void hunger that Alliance Command had run, trying to match the Kethmir timeline with the observable physics. She came to Yunji one morning with fear in her eyes. "Captain," she said, "the void hunger isn't arriving in 18 months. Yunji felt her heart skip. "When?" 12 months. maybe less. The Alliance calculations are wrong. They're running the numbers through models that assume the void hunger moves like ships move, like objects move through normal space, but it doesn't. It moves like it's not bound by the same rules. I've recalculated 3 times. The answer doesn't change. We have maybe a year. This information changed everything. It also meant they had even less time to prepare. But there was more to come. Dr. Woo-Kyung Lee was an astrophysicist who had always worked within the Alliance system, always trusted that the people above her knew what they were doing. She was 44 years old and had spent her life studying space-time. When she received the data about the void hunger, she looked at it from a pure physics perspective, and she found something that made her blood run cold. The void hunger was not random. It was intelligent. Or at least, it was responding to patterns in an intelligent way. It learned. It adapted. If you sent a logical strategy against it, it would study that strategy and find a way around it. The only thing that might work against it was something unpredictable, something that did not follow patterns, something like human emotion. Dr. Woo-Kyung sent her findings to General Hyun-Soo Nam, who was shocked to discover that the best scientific minds in the Alliance were starting to reach the same conclusion that Yoonji had reached through instinct alone. The split became official when Minister Dae-ho Choi made a choice that cost him everything. He had been sent to the USS Hwang Min to monitor Yoonji and ensure that she did not cause any more damage. But as he spent time with the Kethmir, as he saw the evidence for himself, his conviction began to crack. He was a man who believed in rules, in order, in the system. But he was also a man who believed in truth. When he discovered that Alliance Command had known about the void hunger for 3 years and had classified the information as an unacceptable resource drain, he understood that something was fundamentally broken. He sent a message to General Hyun-Soo Nam. Then he sent the same message to every news outlet, every government, every person who would listen. The Alliance Command knew about an extinction-level threat and had chosen to hide it. 3 days later, he was arrested. But it was too late. The information was out. Humanity knew the truth. The response was chaos and division. Some people sided with the Alliance Command and argued that the threat was being exaggerated. Others believed Eunji completely and wanted to prepare for war. Governments fractured. Military units split into factions. And through it all, Yoonji Park worked with her growing fleet, training them in a new way of warfare. A way that emphasized intuition over calculation. A way that valued sacrifice and connection. A way that the Alliance had spent 1,000 years trying to breed out of humanity. It was a way that might be humanity's only chance of survival. And with every day that passed, the void hunger moved closer through the black void of space, learning nothing because there was nothing yet to learn. The base they established was hidden in a system that had been abandoned for 50 years. It was called Kepler-7, and it had once been a major human colony before the Alliance decided the resources there were better used elsewhere. Yoonji transformed it into something new, a training ground, a last line of defense, a place where a new way of thinking could take root. General Hyun-Soo Nam visited in person, which was dangerous. If he was caught working with Yoonji, it would mean execution for treason. But he needed to see for himself what this new fleet was building. He was 58 years old, and he had spent his life believing in military strategy. What he saw on Kepler-7 challenged everything he thought he understood. The crews of the USS Hwang Min and USS Tai Baek were running war games, but they were unlike any war games in the Alliance's history. They trained with the Kethmir, learning the strange, empathic connection that let them anticipate what their teammates would do before it was announced. They practiced sacrifice, how to protect your crew by taking risks yourself, how to calculate not just survival odds but meaning and value. It seemed insane to him at first, but then he watched a scenario where a human squadron, outnumbered 3-1 by simulated enemies, defeated their opponents through coordination that came from something deeper than radio communication. The crews moved together like organisms. They anticipated, they adapted, they won through connection rather than firepower alone. General Nam understood what he was seeing. This was not weakness. This was evolution. "How many ships do you have?" he asked Yunji. 37 combat vessels, she answered. Maybe 200 personnel in support roles. It's not much against the Alliance fleet if they decide to move against us. "They will," Nam said. "But not yet. There's growing support for your side. People are scared now that they know the truth. Some want to fight the Alliance. Others want to prepare for the void hunger. Right now, the chaos is keeping everyone busy." "Can you help us?" Yunji asked directly. "We need weapons. We need ships. We need time." General Nam met her eyes. "I can get you some of what you need, but I can't do it openly. I have people I trust in the military, young officers, engineers, people who believe in what you're building. I can move resources to you through them, but it will be slow." Over the next 6 months, it happened exactly as Nam predicted. Resources flowed to Kepler-7 through unofficial channels. Ships arrived with supplies and new crew members. The training continued, becoming more sophisticated, more powerful. And always, Kai worked with Yunji, teaching the human crews the empathic resonance that the Kethmir had developed over thousands of years. Dr. Wan made a breakthrough in translation technology that let the connection become even stronger. She discovered that human brains, while different from Kethmir brains, had the capacity to form the same kind of collective emotional awareness. It was not telepathy exactly. It was more like a deep intuitive understanding, where each crew member could feel what the others felt without words. Men and women who trained under this system reported feeling less alone. They reported better sleep and stronger emotional connections to their teammates. And most importantly, they reported making better decisions together. But not everyone agreed this was progress. Commander Teo, still in command of the official USS Huang Min under Alliance authority, filed report after report condemning what was happening at Kepler-7. He called it emotional manipulation. He called it a cult. He called it everything that the Alliance feared about allowing feelings to influence judgment. And then, something changed. A reconnaissance mission discovered that the Void Hunger's approach was even faster than Min Seo-jung's recalculations had suggested. They now had not 12 months. They had 8, maybe 9 if they were lucky. This information was leaked to the Alliance command by someone, and it caused panic. Suddenly, even the most logical people in the Alliance understood that traditional defense strategies would not work. The Void Hunger was coming, and the calculations said there was almost no chance of survival using conventional methods. That was when voices inside the Alliance began to whisper Yunji's name. When General Nam finally came to see her in person, his face was grave. "They're ready to listen," he said. "Not everyone. The old guard still wants to fight. But many of the younger commanders, the scientists, the people who understand the physics, they know something has to change." "What do they want from me?" Yunji asked. "Proof," General Nam said. "You have to prove that your way works better. You have to show them that emotional decision-making can beat logical calculation in a direct test." Yunji nodded slowly. She looked at Kai, who stood beside her as always now. The Kethmir's 3 eyes glowed softly in the dim light of the strategic planning room. "We can do that," she said. "Set up a war game. Official observers from the Alliance. Our fleet versus their simulations. Give us the best opposition they can program." 2 weeks later, the test happened. It took place on a military station that had agreed to remain neutral in the growing split between the Alliance's 2 sides. The best Alliance strategic minds created a simulation of a war scenario. Then they sent 30 Kethmir-trained human crew members in actual ships to face it. The human fleet won, Not just barely, but convincingly. They used unconventional tactics that the Alliance's logical predictive models said should fail. They succeeded because they were not fighting as individuals following orders. They were fighting as an organism, where each person felt connected to every other person. When the test ended, the military commanders and scientists watching fell silent. They had expected to see emotional thinking fail in the face of logic. Instead, they had seen something new emerge, a form of thinking that was not opposed to logic, but that incorporated it into something larger. General Nam watched Yunji's face as the results came in. She looked tired. She looked sad. She had not wanted to prove people wrong. She had simply wanted to survive. "The Alliance is asking for a meeting," Nam said. "High Command. They want to work with you instead of against you." But Yunji shook her head. "We don't have time for meetings. The void hunger is coming. How many months do we have now?" General Nam checked his private communications. His face went pale. 6 months. The latest scans show it's accelerating." "Then we prepare," Yunji said. "We bring everyone who will come. Every ship, every soldier, every scientist. We prepare for the thing that's coming, and we stop worrying about whether the Alliance will approve or whether it follows the rules." As she spoke, she felt Kai's presence beside her, felt the emotional resonance that connected her to everyone in the room. She felt the weight of the future pressing down on all of them, and she felt something else. She felt hope. Because for the first time, humanity was not fighting against itself. It was fighting together.